Hi everyone, welcome to Adobe Live, or welcome back if you caught our last session. I'm Flynn and I'm delighted to be here with Alex Lehours. Alex, how are you?
I'm good, mate. How are you?
I'm really good. I'm very excited that we are
Thanks for having me.
finally doing a live stream together. This has been years in the
Yeah, I know, me
making.
too. Yeah. Well, yeah. Last year when I did it, you were just about to have your baby. So,
That's
yeah,
right.
it's been a year already. Yeah,
That's
over a year.
that's right. My
So, yeah.
slightly older than 1 year old. Yeah, it did interrupt our first live stream that we were going to do IRL. I was so excited. Our friend Jeremy Lord um, filled my boots that day on Adobe Live, but it did mean
He did.
that we didn't get to hang out on stream, and I'm just so excited that it's all come full circle.
Oh, me too. Me too. No, you had a very, very legitimate excuse. So, very exciting stuff. So, yeah.
Shout out to everyone in chat that's there. D, great to see you, and Festus as well in the chat. Jumping around, call you Steve, I call you Festus, whatever. It just happens. But it's great to see you. So if you're watching this on YouTube or anything like that, jump over to behance.net/live. You can ask questions as we're going. We've got 2 hours with Alex and counting. We're going to see some of his amazing artwork. I have been talking him up quite a bit today and this week. No pressure, Alex.
Oh, man.
Yeah, I know. What a start, huh? But I thought what we would do. Let's start with some visual aids. Maybe we'll have a look at some of your artwork, and in your own words, you can talk about what it is that you do.
Yeah, sure. Yeah,
So
sounds good.
I'll bring that up now. How about that? Can you see
You got
that?
the website up. Very nice. Very cool.
Cool. So give us
Um,
the yeah. You
Yeah,
tell
well,
us.
basically, yeah. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Alex. I'd call myself an artist. I do a lot of digital work, illustration, as well as mural painting and canvas painting, a lot of exhibition work. So yeah, a bit of everything. I like playing around with typography as well. I actually started off in graphic design years and years ago, and then moved into more of the illustrative art sort of world, if you like. So um, yeah, that's basically me. I just love a bit of a mix. So I think it's fair to say my style is pretty consistent across the mediums that I use. So
Mm.
whether I'm painting a wall or a canvas or doing a digital piece on the Wacom, I like to sort of keep that same style in place. So and my process is pretty much the same regardless of what the project is. So which is what I'll have a chat to you guys about a little later. But yeah, that's pretty much my story. I've been doing it for about over 10 years now, full time for myself. So
So it's
yeah,
been
here
so
we
it's
are.
been so it's been 10 years just full time
Yeah, I
working for
think I
commercial
think 10.
clients. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, that's so. Yeah, I mean, most of my work is is commercial. So I've been lucky enough to work with some big names over the years, which is really cool, very exciting, and being able to travel overseas for work as well and around the country. So yeah, really grateful for everything. It was never thought I'd be in a position like this when I was finishing all my art studies and everything. So yeah, it's a fun way to earn a living. Even a bad day isn't a bad day. I mean, you get paid to draw pictures full time. It's
Yeah.
you can't really complain. So it's yeah, very
That's
very grateful.
super cool. And so often when we've been chatting, you spend days like in your studio painting. You've literally got like paint all over you. Like you're literally
Yeah,
like in the studio, like hard in, and then you're spending some time as well in front of the computer and creating some artwork. Some of a snapshot into that kind of world is what we're going to see. But you said that your approach is quite similar, but those mediums are so on the opposite end of the spectrum. I mean,
they are.
picking up paint and physically painting something. There's no backspace, there's no undo, there's no layers. Um, so I'm very interested in how you approach both of them, but keep the consistency. It's the
Yeah.
thing I can't
Well,
can't
yeah.
understand yet.
I guess for me, because it's so normal for me now, it seems very, I guess every artist, every creative is the same. They've got their process, and once
Yeah.
you get the hang of it, it's very straightforward in your own eyes. For me, though, even when I'm painting, a lot of my stuff, I try to make it look like it's vector clean art anyway.
Right.
So It's
I
that's
might
sort of the
bring up one
trick
of
to.
those as we chat about it, because this is
Yeah. This is
Sydney
one of my
murals.
personal favorites. This one, yeah. So this is a hand painted mural in. I did this one last year in St. Peter's in Sydney. Um, yeah, so it was actually a private commission. The guy who lives in that building and owns that building got me to do it. So yeah, very similar. I guess in regards to what I'm talking about with my process, I like mashing things together. So layers and chaos and all that sort of thing. And every time you look, you might see something new or different, or even see the same thing but in a different way because you've matched it with something else that you've caught on the wall.
Yeah.
So I guess that image you've got up there. The only difference with the hand painted and digital aspect is all the things like you've got. I think there's Skeletor, you've got the geisha, and the flower there. That's all hand painted in a way that I would very similar way in or the style and feel when I do something digitally. And then the only difference is that lady's face. Obviously, with a brush hand painting, I can get a lot more shading and that sort of thing. I haven't really delved into that digitally, so that's what I mean. Why my thing is quite similar, and even the process of piecing the layout and everything, the composition together is very similar because I use the computer for both digital and hand painted stuff in terms of laying all the composition out. So which again I'll chat to you guys about a bit later just to show you what I mean. But
Yeah, like these gradients and these like strong lines are very like look like it could be done in Illustrator, but it's hand painted. Like that's someone's wall.
Yeah. So it's actually I actually like doing that more than the shaded stuff. It's actually really satisfying when you can paint a nice clean line. Even the first line that goes down, if it goes on really clean and smooth, it's very satisfying. So
You're in the zone.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Oh, awesome. And do you use you were talking about painting, do you spray paint at all, or is it all hand painted? Like
I use both. So
cool.
actually,
you do, yeah.
perfect timing. That image that you've got up there with me painting the face. So the face was done with brush. So I just use house paint and obviously brushes. And then the flower next to it was done in spray paint. So all the lines, all the color. So it's a bit of a mix basically. So depends what sort of effect I'm trying to go for.
Yeah, amazing. It's super cool. Well, let's have a look over at oops, here we go. Don't use Firefox all that much, but here we go. Is this one of your digital illustrations, this platypus one? Should we bring that up? I've lost Alex for a second, but he'll be back in a sec. We've just had a couple of dropouts today, ladies and gentlemen, but I know that he'll be back in a moment. So we're just going to have a look over at his illustrations and bring them up so that when he does pop back in, hopefully you guys can see that. And I'm pretty sure this is one of his digital illustrations. Oh, hey, Alex, you're back. Sorry about that. We lost you for a sec.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Connection's been great for everything this week.
Yeah.
No, it's fine. It's always the case, isn't it? When you need it to work, it doesn't work. So yeah. So I just chimed in there when you were talking about that. Yeah, this is a digital illustration. So yeah, very similar in the way I try and piece it all together. You've actually got the same flower in there. From the wall as well, hidden up in that top right corner. So very similar in the way I like to just piece things on top of each other, and I just like having that sort of layered look.
So in terms of composition, like creating like this. Yeah.
But still, and again, it's something I'm going to chat to you guys about while I'm doing it today, but I still like having that sort of symmetry and that sort of, I guess it's my graphic design days coming back to me, but that sort of balance and things are laid out, with thought behind it, but in a way that it looks chaotic and it looks like it's just been slapped together. So, but there still is a bit of a balance that I like to sort of work with. So, and it's just trying to...
A bit of method to the madness in there.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, well said. That's exactly it. So,
yeah, super cool. And there's like textures, like in the background.
Yeah, I'm still. It's funny, like all these textures and things. That's actually something that's quite new to my work over the last couple of years. So I'm still mucking around.
Oh, Oh, sorry, Alex. We completely lost you again. He will be back. Sorry, guys. I'm not sure what's happening with the dropouts there, but we should be fine. He should be able to pop back in just a second. Meanwhile, we can check out another piece of work. And you're back. Sorry, man.
I'm back. This
Sorry,
could, yeah. No, I think it's my end. Yeah, so I think we were just talking about the textures and things that I've been using.
Yeah, that's
just saying that it's fairly new. So I use, I think a lot of the creators out there, use a lot of pre-made swatches and textures and things, and I use one that's called True Grit Supply, which is really cool, and it just adds a different, more depth and a different dynamic to the work as well. You're trying to, get that extra level in there, and a lot of the time, and I'm sure a lot of the other creators would work with this, is when you're working with print, you've got to be conscious of the amount of colors that you're using. This one was created for a print, so in order to get that sort of shaded effect rather than using a third color or a fourth color, actually no, there are only three colors, sorry, you use this sort of etched sort of brush look, which still creates that same effect, but obviously with a limited color palette. So yeah, I think it's one of those things. It can be really fun and exciting to use, but it's also very frustrating because there are so many different possibilities that you can work with, and you think, well, do I do it this way or do I do it that way? And then deciding on which look you prefer. Yeah, it's almost, when you've got too many possibilities, it does create a bit of confusion, but yeah, always nice to have some options.
Oh, awesome. Okay, cool. We'll pop back in, and then we can get started in a moment. But I'll just mention to chat that if you are new to the Adobe Live that we do down here in Australia, we usually have a break about halfway where we can answer Q&A. So you'll see a little Q&A timer there. And yeah, but that doesn't mean that you can't ask questions as we're going. We talk about process, ask questions, all sorts of things like that. But yeah, Alex, if you're ready, I'll jump over to your desktop, and we're in Illustrator today.
Yeah, cool. We're in Illustrator. I pretty much use only Illustrator when I'm creating my artworks. I do use a bit of Photoshop when I'm editing photos for certain things, but yeah, mostly Illustrator. So I guess a bit of a background. I might just show you quickly what I'm planning on doing. I do have sort of a fairly finished piece already that I might just show you guys. And there is a bit of a background to this. So this is a piece I've been wanting to work on for a long time. I'm a big sports nut and a big baseball fan. So I don't know if there are any other baseball fans out there, but this one's a pretty special one because this guy's name is Jackie Robinson, and he was actually the first African-American professional baseball player to ever play, basically. So it was really, there's actually film out about it as well. He's a really, if you know your baseball, he's a really
Oh, Alex, we did lose you for a second there. Sure, he'll be back. Yeah, Festus, just in chat. How tough would it be to lure Google over to Sydney and set up a satellite office? Yes, that would be nice. Have my vote, that's for sure. Sure, Alex will be back in a moment. We can see his screen again. This happened to us a little bit before earlier today, and then usually it kind of comes back in, which I'm sure will happen in a moment as well. Let me just see if I can do anything on my side. I think he's just reconnecting, so. Any baseball fans in chat? talk baseball until we get Alex back. But yeah, the internet gods have not been kind. Oh, hey.
All right, I've tried one last thing, so hopefully that will.
Okay, I can hear you great.
Okay, cool. Sorry.
No, that's okay. It's all good.
I don't know where I was when we lost connection. So
we were talking. So
he's just blabbering on.
One of the first African American baseball player in Major League Baseball.
Yeah. So obviously, I think I was just saying that obviously very influential figure. Throughout history, even now he's gone down on the list of the 100 most influential people of all time. So this is a really special thing. He wore number 42, so I don't know if it dropped out before. I was saying this before, and so the first day he played professionally was April 15th, 1947, which I've got the date there on the ball. Mm-hmm. And now on that date every year, the entire league wears his number 42. I think it's the only number in professional sports that's been retired across the entire league. So obviously he stood for a lot more than just baseball. So I thought I've been wanting to do something, tributing him for a long, long time. So I thought now is as good a time as any to sort of, put something together.
Awesome.
So this is sort of one of many layouts that I've been mucking around with, and I'm still not completely happy with it, but I thought this is what we'll work with today. So as you can see, I've got a few, many, many elements in here. So basically what I do is I draw everything individually, and then I bring it all in together. So what I'll do, I'll leave that file for the moment, and I'll go to this is my blank file. So I guess what I do is I usually start off with a hand-drawn, really rough sketch like this, just pen and paper, really, really rough.
Yeah.
I basically, I have a general idea of what I want to do, how I want the layout to roughly look, and obviously things change as you go and it evolves. So this is just a pen on paper sketch that I've scanned in to the computer. I'll now copy it into this file, and we can work with it from there. And then from there, I'll just lock that file. From there, basically I find just different images that I think can fit each space. So obviously I wanted something here. I wanted that big sort of profile portrait shot of him. And like this sketch, I basically do everything. These are all my hand sketches. Everything starts with a bit of pen and paper for me.
Really?
Always. Anything I'm doing. So this one here that I'm going to work on now, that was actually just a biro pen with some actual, just colored pencils basically. So, and then I have a very, very simple way of using Illustrator. I guess it looks effective when you start layering everything together. But I basically use Illustrator. I use only a few tools in here. I don't delve too far away from what I usually do. And it's basically making it feel as close to me drawing with a pen on paper as, making it feel as close to that as possible. So I'm going to copy this. These are all my different sketches that I've come up with for this piece that I think could work. Sometimes they don't work. You spend time drawing something and then it doesn't actually work with the whole composition. So you sort of look at something else. But all these were just drawn with pen. I've then taken them into Photoshop and just cranked the levels a bit so that the blacks are really black and the whites really white. And then I've just brought it into Illustrator. So I will, and that's pretty much the only time I ever use Photoshop, to be honest. So it's mostly Illustrator.
It's all right. So Photoshop gets a lot of love. Gets a lot of love on Adobe Live.
Yeah.
It's great to be over in Illustrator.
Cool. Photoshop scares me. I don't know. It is one of the scariest programs I've ever come across. It's I'm just going to drop that back a bit. All right. So I'm just going to. I'll probably hide that layer for now. I'm going to bring in the first sketch that I'm going to work on. So you can see it's quite messy. Looks nice and clean when it's on the white. And basically all I do, I use both the brush and pen tool. And what I have here, I've got these two brushes here that I just made myself in Illustrator. So they're sort of more for the finer points and really chiseled angles and things like that. But more often than not, all I do, I might just lower the opacity here a bit. I literally just draw over the top of what I've sketched. So I start off just using the pen tool. And I like to work in this navy sort of color, because a lot of my stuff does have black lines in the end, but working with navy, it's just my personal preference. It just shows me what my process file, what lines what. So I basically just follow these lines all the way around. I like creating, sometimes I actually just use this pen tool, just so it's nice and clean. I usually just like to get my my outline done, if you like, and then I play around with the size of the stroke and all that sort of thing. So I just do that now, and then the fun part comes when we start working on things like eyes and detail on the nose and things like that. So for this particular one, I think a lot of my digital stuff has that sort of retro vintage look anyway, and especially for this one, considering the time that he was around, playing back in the 40s and the 50s, I definitely want this piece to have that sort of nice retro sort of aged feel. So that's why even in the sketch I've done it almost like for those of you who know Photoshop, there's like a great threshold sort of filter in there, and it really plays around with the harsh light and shadows in images. So so I basically just want it to look like something like that today. So quite a simple look compared to some of the, I guess, the hand painted stuff I do, where I really work with a lot of the shading and highlights and things like that. But I guess this gets a similar effect, just in a different style, really. So we're really focusing on the harsh shadows here, rather than playing around with the different tones. All right, so that will probably do me for that. And then and I like to round all my stroke edges. It's just a personal preference. So. And then what I'll do, I just
sometimes do the funny thing when you join them at a harsh, acute angle. So I think it's actually a really good point if anyone out there is getting started with Illustrator, is to round those corners. And sometimes Illustrator, you get to the points and you get these weird spiky jags coming out. That's a technical term. Right. I totally work with Adobe. Talking about. I don't know what they're called. I don't know why it does it. But round corners are your friend for sure.
Absolutely. And obviously from a distance, you can't really tell that they're round or not. So, as long as everything looks clean. So like I was saying before, I basically alternate between the pen tool and the brush tool. With the brush tool, I've got these two pre-made brushes that I already have. And really, within the whole illustration, it just depends on what I think is going to work for each part. So sometimes I might actually draw this with the pen tool and literally just go right around the edges of my line. So it's basically tracing what I've already drawn. So something like that. But then obviously that's not going to work because it's quite small here. And then sometimes I think, actually, you know what, keep it simple. Just do one stroke with the brush and we might get the same effect.
Right.
And it's basically just playing around with, what you think works. So, and I know a lot of guys out there have different techniques with their brushes. I basically just go back over myself. It's almost like I was saying, I make it feel very much like I'm drawing.
Yeah.
The same way I'm drawing on a bit of paper. So,
so how important is getting the drawing, like, using air quotes, like at the first time? Like, will you kind of look at the drawing and go, no, I have to redo this again? Or you bring something in, like, how far can you go from your original drawing when you're in a digital form?
That's a good question. I think, I do the drawing to a point where I'm happy with it anyway, but obviously there's things that I'm going to tweak when I'm working, and I guess the drawing's just for a guide. It's, there might be things that while I'm drawing it in Illustrator, I think, oh, actually that needs less light, or that needs something else there, or that shadow looks a bit harsh. I've put too much black in there, or something like that. So, I think a bit of both. You draw it to a point where you're happy with it. Well, I do anyway. But I think things can definitely evolve once you start taking it, into the digital world. So, and even now, like, obviously I'm very zoomed in with all of this. Some of these strokes and lines might need to, if I zoom out, for example, depending on how it's looking. Oops, sorry, wrong thing. I actually forgot. Sorry, one thing I did forget to do is I draw everything on a separate layer.
Right.
So I guess I'm quite unorthodox in that all the artwork is on, let's call it artwork, is on one layer. My sketch is on another layer, and that's it. Whereas I know a lot of people draw everything in different layers. I'm quite lazy, so all my artwork will be in one layer, and then I group. Once I finish this drawing today, I'll group that together, and that'll be one element. And then I'm one of those, everything's grouped together, and then I just click my way through to find the different parts that I want to access.
You like double click in.
I'm a clicker. Yeah. I'm definitely a clicker. So, which, I mean, for me, I used to work in layers a fair bit, and layers are great, especially when you're working with print files. You do need to work in layers. But for things like this, I like keeping everything on the one sort of artboard, if you like, without layers. It's just, for me anyway, it's just easier to access. And I guess because I draw everything separately and bring it all together as separate elements, I guess theoretically it's working in layers anyway. It's just all on the one layer, if you like. So I've got multiple little things which act as layers, but in the one layer, if that makes sense at all.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's really just how you navigate and what works. And I think for those that were in the previous stream that we did earlier today with Bianca, there was a lot of questions kind of about her process, and she uses Photoshop and she will use layers, and then she groups the layers, and then once she's happy with an element, she'll group that together and just kind of save that as an element.
Yeah.
And I think it's cool for those out there that are just starting, or your career. There are lots of different ways to use like Illustrator, Photoshop to create your artwork. There's not one like the way, and so it's great to see like lots of different approaches.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. I think that's one of the conversations I always have with other creatives and friends, is that there isn't a right way, and you're always conscious, especially doing things like this. You're conscious of, am I doing things the right way, or do other artists have a different way of doing things, or which I'm sure they do, but there isn't a right or wrong. It's, I guess, the beauty of these programs and what we have access to these days is that you can create things in any way that you're comfortable with. So, and I think it's a good thing as well that everyone's got different techniques. That way everything's different. Everyone's got their own individual way of doing things and style. So so I'm just gonna, and I've done it on the wrong layer again. Bear with me. So if we just copy that, go into the artwork layer. There we go. I'm just gonna lock that. Yeah. So basically, I then zoom out and I think, okay, I'm sort of happy with that sort of level of detail for the time being anyway, because realistically when you're looking at the whole piece, he's going to be a bit smaller anyway, because I want him to fit in this middle section of this sketch, so he's going to have to go there. And you don't want it, well, for my work anyway, I don't want it too busy that it's just going to distract you from everything else. So I do like a sort of an element of simplicity, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I noticed that you just then you showed that you're creating quite big, even though it's going to go quite small. We often, I mean, the great thing about working in vector is you can scale it to whatever size you want. But the question is around, will you often work bigger and then scale down? Like, is that just a way that
I do? I think a lot of the time, I have done it in the past, and then I realize, especially for print, I realize that the detail I've put in is too fine, or if you're scaling up or down, depending which way you're going. So sometimes, I mean, this one's a bit different just because I have to zoom in anyway for all this detail. But I think I'd like to work close to the scale I'm working with. Obviously, for large scale things like, massive billboard type things, you can't do that. Mm-hmm. But, if I, like for a t-shirt design, for example, if I want it to be a large back print, I'll work on an A3 sort of size, or something close to what the final print will sort of be sized to. So I do like working close to size, just because I've learnt the hard way many times that when you do eventually scale it to what you want to do, yeah, it's not quite, the level of detail you want it, or it might be too fine a detail and you can't see it, or, whatever the issue is. So, yeah, I think I just do it just to be safe, get it close enough. And then I've even, in the past, what I've done as well, even if I'm working on a smaller scale, I've actually printed out, the part of the image which to the actual size, just to see what the detail's like. So if I'm doing something on an AO or A1 or something like that, I obviously don't have a printer here that can print to that size. But I do try and, I might crop it to an A3 or an A4 and just see what a certain section looks like, just to give me an idea. And even just drawing these lines here, we're going back to chatting about, how accurate does it need to be to the initial sketch. Like even here, as I was drawing these lines, I realized all these little bits and pieces are probably going to make it a bit too busy. So I've just sort of simplified it a little bit more. Even down here on his brow and everything, like there's a lot of little lines in here that I probably won't include, because obviously a pen sketch, that sort of effect might look great there, but I think with this sort of clean digital look that I'm trying to go for, it might just be too much. So, but yeah, I literally, like, as you can see, I'm literally just drawing around majority of these lines. Little bits and pieces I might come back in with my little brush just to give it those little pointed knick-knack little parts. But other than that, I basically just follow it. And then what these Illustrator brushes tend to do is sometimes, depending on your settings, they sort of simplify the line that you're drawing. So I might have to come back in and rework a little bit here and there. But for the majority of it, this is fine. So I just want to get this large part done because it's a big sort of shadow part. So what I've done, this is something that I do all the time, which is probably a long way of doing it, but I've got this line here and this line here. So that's obviously going to create my large shadow up here. So rather than redraw that line, I'm just going to copy and paste this top line here and then connect it to this here. So like I say, it's a really very simple way of doing this, but for me it does the trick. And sometimes, obviously, because I can't see what I'm doing there, I might just change that to a different color so I can actually see what I'm connecting. And then there we go. What's happened there? Even for me, using like a lot of the shortcuts in here, I actually don't enjoy using the shortcuts because I like feeling physically with the pen what I'm doing. I like, searching for things in the windows, and I like that. I mean, I use a few different shortcuts here and there, but yeah, a lot of the time, again, I'm just trying to make it feel like as if I'm working over a bit of paper. So obviously there's a bit of detail there. This is looking a bit too much at the moment. I think I've actually, there we go. So this little highlight part that I've missed, all I do now is I'll draw that section, and I'm basically just going to use the Pathfinder tool in here, which is a great tool that I love using. I'm going to select that and select this. Where is my Pathfinder? I had it here before. I might have to open it again.
I always lose Pathfinder. I don't know why.
It's there, but it's not there. There it was.
Yeah.
and then when it disappears, you realize, it was right in front of me the whole time. Yep. There we go. And then this great little tool, which is the basically just punches objects out of one another. And there we go. Now I've got that sort of shadow part in there.
Yeah. So you're creating the outline of this, like you did it with the outline of his profile before, and in this case you've done the outline of that shadow. So you obviously instinctively know, like you did the sketch, so you know instinctively, that's a section. Later on you can see those other sections that are going to be a big glob, and you do the outline first, and then if there are holes or anything that are required to punch through, you'll use Pathfinder to pop them out.
That's exactly right. Yeah, that's exactly right. So I guess, I mean, the more and more we talk about this now, I guess the initial sketch that you were asking before, it does have to be fairly close to what you want it to look like, because I'm basically just following all these lines and all these guides that I've already created with the pen and paper. So and then little things like this, I just come back in with a couple of the brushes I've used. Obviously some lines in here look a bit thin to me, so I'm just going to come back over with one of these brushes and just thicken it up a bit. Something like that. And then these little parts here, rather than try to redraw them, because I want them to have a bit of a fine line, I just come back in with this brush tool that I have, and just draw those separately. And then obviously I can play around, with the stroke size and things like that to see what. It can get quite time consuming when you start fiddling around with all this detail, and it's one of those things like you have to learn when to stop and when's enough, because working very close like this, when you scale it back to what it's actually going to look like, and it's something I learned when I was doing all the mural work as well, is what the eye is actually going to see from the finished size. So all this detail that I'm putting in may not be visible anyway. So, but anyway, I'll put it in there anyway.
I think it's a really good point, because time is finite. Time is a resource. We all have less time than ever, really. And especially when you're working on a commercial project, time can literally be money as well. And we talk a lot about finding efficiencies, and I think balance is a really important thing. We've had some photographers on here as well. Demis talks about that quite a lot, about understanding the output of where the artwork is going to go and how much time you should spend on the really small details. Attention to detail is great and really important, but also the balance of time versus, are people actually going to see that? Can you, is it an important or critical part of the project? So it's really cool to hear you talk about that too.
Oh yeah, I get caught up in that stuff all the time. It drives me nuts because you focus on a little detail, and obviously, I've said it so many times before, but whatever you're doing, you're your own worst critic all the time. You're going to pick up on things that no one else is ever going to know. But unless you're happy with it, no one else is going to convince you otherwise. So I get caught up on little details all the time. The amount of times I'll bug my wife, what do you think of this? Like, what if I change it to that or that? And, she won't even be able to tell the difference with what I've done, because I'm just stuck in that sort of mindset of that's all I can see.
Yeah.
And until I get it the way I want it, I'm not going to be able to look at it otherwise. But then, it goes back to that argument of, you've got to be clever with it as well. You can't spend too long on something that no one's ever going to really pick up on anyway. And especially if it's for a client job and you're, working to a deadline and budgets and all that sort of stuff, you've got to be, you've got to do it in a very clever, smart way. That's one of the things that I've been doing this for so long now, and I still struggle with it. You want every piece of yours to be the best thing you've ever done.
Yeah.
And so sometimes, even though there is a budget there and there is a deadline, you don't want to rush it at the same time. You want it to be the best thing, because, why, especially in this creative world, there's no point working on this cool stuff if, you're not going to be passionate about it. You're not going to care what you're doing. So that's my mentality anyway. Every job I do, everything I want to put 100% in, and it doesn't necessarily have to be the best thing I've ever done. But I definitely want it up there as, something that I can be proud to show that's mine. I think that's even more, for me anyway, that's even more of an incentive when you're doing client work, because, they've come to you for you, and you want to show them what you can do. So, whereas I do know a lot of other creatives who, with a client job, they'll just get the brief done and do what they need to do, which is fine. But, for me, I want to, obviously show the best what I can do. So, and even here, I've just decided there might be a little bit of light there. So I'll bring it down.
There was a question as you were there. I think Lindsay answered the question. Were you using the pencil or the pen tool? And you're switching between.
I am. I'm switching between. So for these big block shapes that I'm doing now, I use the pen tool, like we were saying before, just to get the outline. And then, for example, like this little section here, I want it as a point. I've drawn that with the pen tool. It's not quite the sharp point that I want, so I'll come back over that with my brush tool, to give it a really sort of fine point. And a lot of the time it really depends on the look. Sometimes I want things really rounded edges and things like that. I don't want it quite fine. I don't want it pointed. So that, working with the pen tool the whole time actually works really well for me. But there's other times where I want it really fine and really quite detailed. And I start using the brush tool. So it really just depends. And it breaks it up as well. Drawing around these lines for hours and hours can get pretty tedious. Especially now, obviously I've got an idea of where I'm drawing, but I still when you get caught up and zoomed right into all these lines and outlines, sometimes you don't know what part you're actually working on.
Right.
Because you're right in there. You sort of, obviously I know it's a shadow, down on his neck and leading down to his jersey and everything. But then when you get caught up on all these little details that you see, and then you step back and you think, oh, hang on, that actually needs to change, or that needs to be bolder or something like that. So you can see it slowly coming together now.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, again, it's a lot more simplified than some of the other stuff I do, but I really love working with harsh light and shadows. So with a lot of my work, one side will be very, very light, very very dark, and I just love that contrast. It adds that drama to it all. It really sets the mood. And I guess again it helps with this, like I was saying before, I want this piece to have that sort of vintage retro feel. And back in the day, in terms of printing methods, they didn't have the technology that we have now. So things were printed, if they were printing his face in a newspaper or something, it would look very similar to something like this, because that was the capacity of printers in the day. So, and it's funny, we spend all this time and effort now in creating all these different brushes and swatches to make things look like their age, to make it look like they used to when they were trying their best to make it look as realistic as they could. So it's funny how we go back on things, and I find trying to make things look aged is so difficult. Even when I'm doing a mural or anything, I want it to have an age look. I just don't know how to do it sometimes. So it's just funny how things sort of go.
Yeah, that's true.
Backwards like that sometimes. So yeah.
So letting some people know that may have missed the beginning of the strings. It seems like there's quite a few people in there since we've started. So we're here with Alex Lehours, and artist, muralist. He's showing his digital side of things today, of course. But we had a little bit of a look. Yeah, it'd be pretty hard. Maybe we could do a mural stream one day, but we'd probably just be looking at like the back of your head or your butt as you're painting. Maybe we can mic you up one day or something. We'll work something out. But
that would be very cool, actually.
But we're focusing on the digital side of things here at Adobe Live. If you're watching on YouTube or somewhere else, our live chat is over at behance.net/live. We've got Q&A in about 15 minutes, but we've had some great questions so far, and I promise I am. And Johanna's helping me keep on top of some of those great questions that have come through. So Q&A is just a bit of a pens down break for Alex, and we can have a bit of a chat, and then we'll get stuck into part 2 as well. So that's what's happening. That's what we're doing.
Sounds good. So I guess just after you say that today, what I'll do, I'll draw as much as I can on a few of these separate elements. Obviously, it's quite time consuming, so I may not be able to finish all, but I will get to a point where I'll have enough to show you guys, and then I'll start piecing it together and chat to everyone about, the process of putting together my compositions and how I mash it all in.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. 2 hours or less than 2 hours to do an entire mural is, even I wouldn't ask someone to do that. That's a bit crazy. So it's good that we can jump around.
You'd be surprised. I've had a lot of clients out there asking me. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, what, you can't get it done in an hour or so? No, I can't, sorry. That's fine. It's funny, time goes really fast. Wow.
It really does. Yeah, it really does.
You think 2 hours, it just shows how much you can actually get done when you sit down and focus on it. Mm-hmm. Without checking Facebook and Instagram every 5 minutes.
That's true. 4
Yeah.
We're all guilty of that.
Good. Oh, yeah. Especially, I work from home anyway. I'm lucky enough I've got my studio and office here anyway, but especially now in this time, a lot of people working at home, I'm sure they found those distractions even more in your face.
I think I noticed that a lot because I've also mostly I work for myself. I work from home, work on the road, work in offices, all sorts of stuff. And it was quite interesting when this isolation time came in, and watching people make all the talk about making the mistakes online that I made when I first started out as well. The distractions, like cooking every day and cleaning every day and getting to about 4 o'clock and realizing you haven't actually done any work. All that stuff that you learn not to do as someone that's self-motivated.
Absolutely. It's I guess it's funny though. Like a lot of people who don't work from home always ask me like, "How do you get on with your stuff at home?" And it's just it becomes you get used to it. It becomes your office when you've got work to do. You just get on with it.
Mm.
For me, I mean, obviously at the moment things are very, very tough for a lot of people. But for me, I guess in terms of work, things haven't really changed because I'm here anyway.
Mm.
Cramped. Well, not cramped, but tucked away in the office or the studio. Usually talking to myself or the dog. Yeah, so it's a funny thing, but I think a lot of people have enjoyed the taste of being able to work from home. So it is enjoyable, and you don't have that commute each morning. And the only thing I would say about working here by yourself is you do miss out on a lot in the world. A lot of times, if I don't turn the news on or something like that, because I haven't been out talking to people, I've got no idea what's happening.
Miss things, yeah, totally.
Yeah, exactly. So I guess everything's got its pros and cons. So I shouldn't complain though. There's a lot of times I literally get up out of bed, straight into the studio or office, and I'll get dressed at like midday. So I can't really complain. It's one of those things.
I was just thinking about your dog. Is your dog allowed in the studio that you paint in, or is that?
He's in there all the time with me.
Oh, he's in there.
Yeah, he's a bit older now, so he's just over a year now. So when he first came in, he was an absolute terror in there. As it would be, all these new things and everything's a game to him. Now he's a little better. He comes in and depends what mood he's in. A lot of the time, he's a dog, so he sleeps all the time. So a lot of the time he'll come in, I'll leave the door open for him, he'll come in, and I won't even know he's in there until I sort of step back and he's fast asleep lying behind me. And then there's other times when he comes in and all he wants to do is play. And of course, that's the time where I'm painting something, on the floor or right at the bottom of the canvas, and he'll come and, I've got a lot of videos of him putting his head right in the way of where I'm trying to paint, and he ends up with a big splotch of paint on his nose or his face or something like that. So there was a time, actually a little while ago, maybe a couple of months ago, he came in, found, my paint and my brushes, and my brushes were sitting in a cup full of paint, and he decided to grab one of the brushes and go for a run around the house. So we had white paint everywhere. So it's enjoyable for a little while, and then after a while you get pretty fed up with things like that happening. No, he's good. So yeah, usually he's sitting in the office with me.
Oh yeah,
fast asleep. But I've left him out today because he'll just want to cry, and he's a very needy dog. He wants to be cuddled and picked up all the time. So which is nice, but when you're trying to get a job done, there's only so many hours in the day. I can't play with him all the time. So
that's
I
true.
figured best just to leave him outside today.
It's been quite fun with the live streams. Everyone, so many people have pets and things like that. We've had some cameos. But little Chihuahua on at one point.
I can bring him in a bit later if you like.
Yeah, let's do it. I think Chat would like to see the dog. It's always a hit.
A lot of the time, and I'm not kidding, I'll when I bring him in later, he's usually sitting right here on my lap, and I'm having to work, around him. Obviously, I can't do it around him. So if I'm replying to emails or whatever, my wife does the same. He's sitting there, and you're sort of working with your arms like that, trying to access the keyboard and your mouse and everything. So, and he's fast asleep in your arms. So
amazing. Chat, let us know if you want to see a dog cameo at some point. I'm sure we can make that happen.
Yeah, we'll get Ziggy on. He can take over the rest of the session. Ziggy.
Cool, man.
Little cheeky bugger.
Back to the work. There was a question we could probably
Yes, sorry.
No. We got so many questions for Q&A, so I might get started with some as you're going. A while ago, Emery, I can't read that properly. Emery was asking, how long do you think about your work before you draw your first sketch?
Oh, good question. I'd say a long time. I don't actually sit at my desk and think, what can I draw? Obviously, it's an idea that I'll be, playing with over a few days, and a lot of the time, if I have an idea to do something, it does actually consume my thoughts, thinking, okay, how am I going to get it to work? So when I think of a piece, whether digital, hand painted, whatever, I've always I always think of the first, I guess, central element, and I have a rough idea of sort of the pose or the layout or the size of what I want to be sort of, I guess everything else will be centered around. Once I get that sorted, or I find a reference or something that I like that I think I can work with, all the other bits and pieces sort of come from there. They sort of evolve around that central part. So I guess the first sketch is, yeah, I'd probably sit with it for a couple of days, or even if I come up with an idea that I'm happy with then and there, I'll draw that up first. But in saying that, once I've drawn it and I put it into the file, it may not look good, it may not work, it may be, it's one of those things that I guess the whole thing, it's an evolution when you're creating an artwork. It's what you think can work in your head doesn't always necessarily work. So I guess I sort of sit with it for a little while before I start drawing.
Cool.
That's a good question.
Yeah, absolutely. There was a question before when you're bringing, because you mentioned you did some editing in Photoshop before you brought the file in. It's just how you brought that in. So I'm guessing, did you
did
you save it as a PSD or they were just interested in the process.
Actually, what I can do, I can show you guys if you like as well. I basically, once I scan it in, I load it into Photoshop and I do save it as a PSD file, and then I actually open. Actually, I'll show you now. So if I just go to open, I usually keep all my. So I've got one major folder, and then I have different categories. So this is my sort of sketches folder. So all these files here, you can see they're all the Photoshop files that I've saved. Let's go to this one, for example. So if I open this file, I open it as objects because usually I have 3 or 4 sketches on the one page, which I have saved as layers in Photoshop. So now I can just access each individual thing. And you can see all I've done is I've cut quite crudely around the edges, just to crop it out. So for a sketch, it's pretty easy. But I can actually go through that process if people are interested, just to show you from obviously the scanned sketch into Photoshop, what I do, and then how I bring it in. But I literally just open up the Photoshop file and then just copy over to whatever file I'm working with. And just just copy and paste it in, and then work on it from there. So then that then turns out to, where is it? Sorry, this one. So then these are all this is the file I had open earlier. These are all my individual photoshopped, hand-drawn images saved in Photoshop, and then opened in Illustrator, and then I put everything just in one file, just so it's easy to access. I know where everything is. And again, things like this image, for example, that I've got here, I've tried fitting in the layout yesterday, and it just didn't work. So you try something else, or you draw something else. So
that's cool.
Where am I? Working file. No, that's the old file. That's some textures. There we go. Live file.
And we got exactly 5 minutes until our actual Q&A. I know I kind of started a little bit early there, but just to let you know how we're tracking.
Awesome. I'll probably have him. What I'll do, actually, I think I've drawn enough of him to give you guys an idea. I'll leave that for now. So now what I do, obviously I've done my majority of the dark shadows. I know there's a bit more to draw there, but I do have a file ready to go up for afterwards. So I'll just wrap this one up now. What I now do is on the artwork file layer, I'll group all this together. So all my shadows are now grouped together. And then what I'll do from there is this sketch, I might just crank the opacity a little bit more. What's going on? There we go. What I'm going to do now is start working on the shaded, those shaded parts.
Cool.
Which will then in itself create these highlights. So I'll just do that really quickly. Again, it's the same sort of process. I'll probably work with a completely different color, like a red or something like that, so it stands out. And then, so then I start this. I can actually, with these shaded parts, I can actually be a little bit quicker because they don't have to be completely accurate to what I've drawn, because they're going to sit behind all these shadows anyway. It's just to create that extra depth in the image. And then what I'll, in the next session, before I start mucking around with the layout and things like that, I'll show you guys just a few different ways of how I actually execute these shaded parts with different textures or brushes or things like that. Sometimes, for this particular sketch, I'll probably just, I'm literally drawing these big blocks, which I'll have as a grey colour or something like that. But there are times where I like mucking around with different textures to give you that same effect. So this is really rough. It's just basically one long line. It can get quite complicated depending on what part you're working on. So
will you always
obviously all these lines
second shadow in red?
Not necessarily in red, just a colour that obviously is a big contrast to my shaded colour, my shadow colour.
Just so you can see it easier?
Just so you can see it. And then what I'll do, so I might just do, you know what, I'll actually, how much time have we got? We've got a couple of minutes. So
a couple of minutes, and we can go a little bit over. It's totally fine. It's just for us. The joke I make is just, it's like the school bell with the teacher. When the school bell would go off and the teacher would say, don't get up, the bell's for me, not for you. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Well, I was always late anyway, so that works out well. So what I'll do, that's on my sketch layer at the moment. I'm going to copy that into my artwork layer. And I'm going to send that to the back. So basically, if I hide that, now it looks a bit harsh now because it's red, but if I do it, say, like a light grey, I'm just using the swatches. Already you start to get a sense of depth around his eye. Yeah. So what I'll do, I'll bring in, these are files that I've already drawn. So this is a finished one from yesterday when I was drawing it. So what I'll do, I'll go back to my working file. Now from here, I basically will copy this grey layer. I'll double click, my good old clicking. Now I'm within that group. So all these elements were grouped before. I'm now inside that group, so I can play around with each individual part now. And I like everything to be together. I'll then take this outline shape and I will copy that and paste it directly in front. And then that's going to become my background color.
Oh, cool. That's quick. Just like that.
This gray, I might just, really crank. And then I will select all this blue with the magic wand tool and I'll make that black. Sorry, I've skipped a step. I've just realized I didn't do this part here. Sorry. Just going to punch that out. Go back to our Pathfinder. Okay. So sorry, I've skipped a step there. So once I've grouped everything together, I actually then, because I was using a lot of brush lines and things in there, and obviously the pen tool, I then go to, and I'm happy with the size of my stroke and everything. I then have it all grouped and I basically just outline all my strokes. A lot of the time before I do that, I will copy and paste this and that becomes my working file. So nothing's outlined, everything's still lines and shapes. And then if I decide, hang on, I need to add another line or something like that, this is obviously the file that I can do that, or I can change the width of the stroke or anything like that.
So you'll keep a version, like you'll keep like an original version just in case. Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. And then that's your original file. And like I say, if you want to update anything, if you've gone too far down the line and you've outlined strokes and all the rest of it, then you can actually go back to that original file and edit a few things. It's just much easier. And so then what I do, so I'll place, that's my original one over there. Then what I do is I copy and paste another one and I basically just play around with the different colors. So with this one, obviously it's got the gray, so I might make it black with grays. Or this one, if I want a really sort of retro vintage look, I might try with just different sort of sepia sort of tones. So if I go like a brown, and then make the grey at the base sort of a cream beigey sort of color. So then you play around with things like that. And then what I do, if I go back to my, so these are my finished sort of illustrations, if you like. And this is what I was talking about before, where I play around with different brushes. So rather than having solid color creating the shadow, I'll use, one of these stroke brushes that has the same effect, gives it that sort of vintage sort of
like
etched line
sketch kind
it's
of
half tone, yeah.
Yeah.
So basically what I've got in here, I'll go layer by layer. So I'll double click through my layers. So I've got a solid layer sitting on top, which is just I've got it locked, sorry. So this layer here sitting on top is basically one of these half-tone sort of aged brushes. And so I've changed all the grey shadow, I've changed to this sort of striped etched sort of look. It's just a different look. And then over the top, because I want it to look really aged, I've basically just copy and pasted that background color layer and put it on top to give it that sort of, really subtle half-tone printed sort of look. And then obviously once you zoom out from the distance, it does create that sort of effect. But then me being me, I get fed up with things really quickly, or I overanalyze things. I'll have that in place for a day or two, and then I'll look at it again thinking, actually, no, I prefer this much cleaner, solid look. Or there's a bit of both where this is one I probably will use, where I've added different brushes around the edge just to give it, I guess, a mix between that half-tone, Totally. So that's what I was saying earlier, like there's so many different possibilities. It really just depends, and then you get to a point where you just have to pick which one you think is going to work best. So
oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, that's
I personally, I love the textures that are coming through. It is amazing. So some comments as we were going, like once you did the first outline, the first shadow, as soon as that second shadow came in, it just like immediately, like everything started like really coming together. You could really clearly see kind of where everything was going. Super awesome watching you work, and that's part one. That's only part one.
That's part one.
We've got a whole other part.
There's a lot more.
So we're at our Q&A break. Hello to everyone that has just joined us. We're here with Alex Lehours, and we're taking like a 5-minute kind of Q&A break. There's been some awesome questions. I don't think I'm going to get to all of them, so I'll do my best. So sorry if I miss your question. Everyone's really interested in your work, Alex. There was a question around
Thank you.
You're talking about the studio. You have like essentially you have a digital studio, and then you have like a physical painting studio.
I do, yeah.
The question was around, does working at home require making physical alterations to your home? Like, so that you have a distinct office area or wing, and that's where you go from like 8 to 6 every day to do the work.
Yeah, that's actually a really good question, because when I first started, I think it was 2011 or 10, when I first started working for myself from home, I worked out of my bedroom. So it was a pretty
tough.
Yeah, I mean, it is tough because you really have no balance. So it's great to be able to have those spaces, even though they're at home, they are separate to the rest of the house. Obviously, if you've got it, that's great, but it's not, it's just not possible for a lot of people. It wasn't possible for me for a long time. So I basically, where we live, I've converted our spare room into my office. So everything I need is in here. It's like a little, I've got toys everywhere. I've got books, I've got, artworks, whatever. And then we've got a garage, which I've basically converted into the studio. There's a little bit of a garage aspect to it with all our household things that we need, because obviously you do need that.
Still need storage.
90% of it. Yeah, 90% of it is the studio. So I guess, it's just lucky that I've got those sort of spaces that I can play with, but it makes a huge difference being able to separate your work areas from your house areas when you're working at home. So, and again, it goes back to obviously this time, a lot of people are struggling because they're having to work on the kitchen table or dining room table or, in a bedroom. So it does make it hard, because you have to know when to switch your work brain off when you're at home. So,
and we're talking about that earlier, and it is an acquired skill. It's a skill that you develop over time. So many people were forced into it and suddenly just thrown in the deep end, so to speak. And they've been forced to discover it, and how they.
And I still struggle with it.
Oh yeah.
I still, like, if I'm really into a job or a project that I'm working on a Saturday or Sunday, I want to sneak away and be able to continue working on it. But obviously, you got to have a bit of a balance and a life as well. So, but very important to have those separate spaces for sure.
Awesome. Thanks for answering that. And there's another question. Have you ever worked with an animator to animate your illustrations?
I'd love to. I think for a few jobs here and there, the client has sort of passed on some of my work to an animator,
Mm.
just for some basic things for what they need. But I've never actually worked with an animator myself, but I'd really, really like to, because obviously, yeah, there's a lot of depth into it. So seeing all these different elements move about would be pretty fun.
Yeah, I can definitely see some things like looping animation stuff happening with like some of the smaller details, some of the textures slowly moving and looping would be really cool. Like the way that your final artwork looks. I think that'd be cool.
Yeah, I'd love to see. That'd be really cool.
Oh, there we go. We know some pretty talented animators here at Adobe Live, so maybe we can check that out. Just to expand from that one, do you collaborate with other artists like illustrators or designers?
Yeah, I've worked with a few artists in the past, actually. And even, I guess, one of the great things about being creative and knowing a few guys, it's like this little community where you can sort of feed off each other. And, I work with, I know Dale and I know Jeremy, who have obviously been on, on these shows before. Jeremy, I've worked with a lot. He's actually been on site with me for painting stuff as well. And we pick each other's brains on different techniques and how to do things and what programs to use. Same with Dale. Like I'm always asking Dale for, technical support with, programs and equipment and everything. So, and it's really, yeah. So I have been lucky enough to actually work on projects with a few artists, but also just, dealing with artists day to day, just having chats and picking, people's brains about different ideas and trying to collaborate, things like that. It's really beneficial as well. So yeah, definitely work with a few artists.
Yeah, super cool. And so a question, I actually know the answer to this, but I think it's important to talk about with mural. Being a muralist, very difficult at the moment to get out and paint walls, right? That kind of world has changed. But then I remember chatting with you a couple of weeks ago when we were talking about this, and you're saying, yeah, I've just been painting. I've been painting for like the last 3 days. But you often will paint on like canvas or on something else in the studio. Can you talk to us about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So obviously, mural stuff. I guess it's easing a bit now, but at the beginning, definitely no go. So obviously that work dried up a bit. But I, lucky enough, had a fair bit of work in place already, and it was all canvas work. So a lot of the times, if people want something created for their home or their office or something like that, but they're not sure how long they're actually going to be in that space, I actually recommend that we paint. If you've got, say, a 9-meter long wall, rather than paint those 9 meters, let's space it out on 3 or 4 different canvases, and then we size it pretty much to the size of that space, and then they basically act as individual pieces, but work as one major piece when they're installed on the wall. And then that way, if ever you're leaving that place or you get fed up with them, you can just take them down or take them elsewhere. So I do that a lot. I actually paint a lot of large scale canvases, and that's what I've been working on the past few months now. So I guess you still sort of get that mural feel, but obviously you're indoors, you're at your own space. It's a bit easier to manage. You don't have the natural elements getting in your way, like the sun or the harsh heat or rain, or especially now coming into winter. Those cold winter mornings on site can be pretty brutal. So it's great. You've got the best of both worlds: painting, being at home in your own comfort. It's great.
Yeah, awesome. Do you feel like your work is quite, the output is, I'm trying to find the word, but you've got lots of different outputs. Like if you were I don't mean to say just a muralist, but if you were focusing on the one medium without diversifying across digital and commercial, and then, things like that could be a bit more of a scarier place to be right now in the current climate. So you're quite happy that you're spread across like quite a few different mediums in that sense?
Yeah. I think I'm lucky in that sense that I've sort of experimented with different mediums over the years, and now I can, obviously offer those services. So obviously times like this, it is great to be able to diversify a little bit, but also someone like my personality, I get very bored very quickly with my work. So if I'm at my computer for a couple of weeks, after 2 weeks, I want to be back on site, and then vice versa. I might get fed up being on site. So I like having that change anyway. But also, throughout the year, even without all this pandemic at the moment, but throughout the year, obviously there's months where people might hit you up for only digital stuff. And there's no mural work, or vice versa.
Yeah.
So I'm lucky enough that when one sort of dries up, the other one's in place to sort of take over, which is great, and it keeps me interested. I'm always trying to learn different things, both painting and digitally. So I think it helps me develop my skills. It's funny, like working digitally actually helps me refine my skills with painting as well, because you just think of different ways of doing things, different techniques, and the longer, like anything, the longer you do it, the more you learn and you figure out different ways of doing things or more effective ways of doing things. So I like having sort of all the different things to work on. So obviously I have my favorites, like painting and doing these digital pieces are my favorites, but there's some other work in there that I do as well. So
super cool. That's great. I am conscious of giving you enough time to get back into part 2, so we'll move on from the Q&A break into the second part, because we've got about 44 minutes or something to do that. So we'll jump back in.
Worries.
Thanks for answering the questions. Thanks for the great questions in chat as well.
Excuse me.
That doesn't mean that we have to stop asking questions, of course. Feel free, if there's a time to ask the question as we go, we'll try and get them in. But here we are, part 2.
Cool. Well, what I'll do now, I think, because I've spent a fair bit of time showing you guys how I actually draw things, so it might get a bit repetitive, a bit of the same thing. What I might do is jump to how I piece together my compositions, and then I don't think that's going to take too long. So then once we go, I can then come back to basically drawing a few more bits and pieces.
Cool.
So what I've done, I've got my... this is my sketch that I have. I've obviously already copied it into where's my live file? Here we go, live file. So what I'll do, I will just hide those for the moment. I'll get my sketch back up. Oh, sorry, this sketch. So this is basically like I was saying before, my really rough sort of layout. Now that I've got things like this Jackie drawn up, I can sort of start seeing things come together. So what I'll do, I'll leave him down here, and I'll go back to this is my file with a few more of the finished pieces. I don't know which one to use, so I might just use this one for the time being. It's nice having options. So I'll copy that in. This is all still going on this same artwork layer. Again, it's not the right way to work, it's not the wrong way, it's just how I do it. I'm going to bring him in, and basically what I do with all my elements, I size it to how I think, and I just sort of drop it on top of roughly where I thought each thing could live. The other thing with my work I like working with, I love working with these sorts of angles. So again, it's that sort of, what we were saying before, it's that sort of that method of creating chaos, but still having a nice balanced, I guess, design aspect to it. So I want him to be angled. I don't know why, I just love working on angles. I think for me anyway, it just looks a bit more interesting when things just front on, for my work anyway. So he's obviously our main feature in here. And then what I'm going to do, I will start a new layer. This is just going to be for my background color. I think I want this piece to sort of be beige tones, sepia tones mixed with, I'm going to get a bit of navy in there, so it looks quite retro, quite vintage. I'm going to hide that sketch. Okay, so he's there. I'm going to bring right to the bottom. Sorry. Okay, there we go. So usually what I do, I've got him finished now. Then I would move on to drawing, the next sort of element that I want featured. I've drawn a few of these already.
Cool.
And I can go through, if there's anyone in particular that anyone's interested in how I did it, just let me know, and I can obviously have a chat about and show you what I've done.
There were some questions about type, because I think some people saw like a lot of your work, and they've looked at how great the type is. So there's definitely a lot of interest in in your typographic treatments there.
Well, I guess quickly, obviously, this type here, the Dodgers stuff, this is obviously, back then they were the Brooklyn Dodgers. They've now since moved to Los Angeles. This is obviously their typography that they've used. So I've just used that. Yeah. But all these other, but in saying that, I do like adding, like this one, for example. So what I do like adding, drop shadows and key lines and all sorts of things to my work. So I can play with that just to show you guys. So this is what I start with. I'll find a lot of these old baseball, all these old sports sort of script fonts were actually hand drawn. So there's not actually a font that that works with. So I've basically redrawn this font just for now. Obviously, it's someone else's, font and style, or not font, sorry, someone else's script text and everything. So I want to obviously make it different, use it enough. I mean, for things like this, obviously, all this Brooklyn Dodgers branding is quite an essential part of his career. So I want to use that. You do, just a general warning, you just have to be careful using obviously copyrighted sort of stuff, I do like to use a bit of it, and I guess the word's appropriation, where you sort of play around with different things. But for this, I think it's fine. So this Dodgers text, and I love this. This is one of my favorite script designs, ever.
Cool.
I just love this old.
The big D.
Yeah, the D is really cool. And then you get all these other fonts. Like this is a font that I've purchased, where they try and replicate, that old hand drawn sort of script style. So anyway, for the purpose of this, I'm just going to use this one. So I've redrawn this. Now that I've got that file, everything's obviously all together. I'll then just copy and paste that exact same thing on top of each other, paste it in place. I'm going to put it to the back, and then I'm going to convert it just to outlines. And with a dark brown, I basically just play around with the key line to give it that sort of extra punch. I'm going to outline that stroke. And then what I like to do with the path finder tool is basically, it's called Unite basically. You click that and it basically punches all that color, all that you've selected together as one solid piece. So if you haven't used it before, that now, even though there's obviously it's just the outline, that's all one solid piece now, which is the same as what I did with this top text as well. I'm then going to take that outline, the dark brown, and I'm going to copy that layer again. I'm then going to send it to the back again. And then basically just with, I'm just going to move it just to create that sort of drop shadow, maybe sort of here. I then select all of it, group it, and then I want another, I don't know if you can actually see, it's probably hard to see at the moment because it's on a light color, but I've got one final key line around the whole thing. So I'm going to do that. So I've basically got everything grouped together. I copy and paste it in front. I use my Pathfinder tool, and that basically creates one massive shape of all those together. I drop it to the very back again, and then again with my stroke tool, I'm going to select the color. Oh, the color's disappeared for some reason. With my stroke color, I'm going to just play around with the size of the stroke again. And that's it. And so it just adds, for me anyway, for my work, it just adds another, I like that sort of three-dimensional look.
Yeah, it looks super cool.
That's basically how I do it. So, and with all the font stuff I do, this one, for example, I created this graphic basically just using the circle tool, the square tool, and then the pen tool to create these very, straight line edge shapes to create this sort of vintage decal, if you like. And then these fonts, this is just a standard, sorry, this font here is just a standard font that I've used. And obviously you play around with the different, there's a great effects in here with the warp tools, and you can arc all your different texts and things like that. I might go through that one a little bit later because that's quite cool to see come together. So I guess that's focusing on the typography side of things. We've covered obviously all these illustrations are very much the same process as this. And now the next thing, so I draw all these different elements together. This thing here isn't actually mine. That's the actual one of the Major League Baseball things that I thought could work, but I don't think I'm going to use that. But then what I do like to do is, even though there's fonts that obviously, like these existing scripts, obviously, trademark to the different teams and things like that, I like them creating my own sort of thing. So this Brooklyn is an old script that they used to use, and then I've added these other fonts just to create my own sort of lockup, if you like. And then I did the same with the ball. I drew the ball, added the date and that Brooklyn thing. Same on this flag.
Yeah.
I drew this flag and then used that same script across. So changing it up a bit. And this design here is based on an old sort of pennant that I found online.
That's
of
cool.
when
There's a lot
these
of
guys,
love for that in the chat as well, and that's the one that I was looking at too. That effect.
Love that sort of stuff.
You've done. Yeah, that's super cool.
And then you just play around with the colors and stuff. So yeah, really cool. Obviously, like I've followed something that I found online, which is fairly close to it. I've changed a few things, like added the B, changed some of the fonts and all that sort of stuff. But I love all that sort of those retro lockup designs anyway. And yeah, so what I'll do now, I'll just show you guys. So obviously I've got my main Jackie Robinson piece in there. These are some of the other sketches. So these are my hand-drawn sketches that I'll show you what I do. These are the hand-drawn ones. For the purpose of me piecing together my compositions, I actually use just the live trace tool, because obviously that is a flat Photoshop file at the moment. So obviously everything's flat. I want to be able to manipulate the colors because I want to figure that out before I draw the final artwork for a lot of this stuff. I like to work out colors. So what I do, I just go to the image trace tool, which is up here. Obviously we've got white, gray, and black, so I need to use the 3 color ones. It's going to give me a really simplified version of what's happened. It's going to lose a lot of the detail in these lines, but that's okay for the purpose of putting it all together. I then expand it, and now I can go in and basically everything has been converted to vector shapes, and I can go in and play around with the colors. So I want him the same colors as the other Jackie piece. So it's basically, and I sort of stick to the same grade palette that I always use. So I know exactly, a lot of the time I'll just use the standard Illustrator swatches in here. Unless I'm working with a print file, I use Pantone codes or certain CMYK colors, but for the purpose of this, I'm just using the standard swatches in Illustrator, but I know which ones I usually use. So we'll go with a dark gray. And then what I do, so that's all together now. I will copy that over to my live file. And what I do, I don't know if it's easy to see. Oh, sorry. There we go. Basically, I've got 3, so including the central portrait image here. I'll move this out of the way. I've got 3 basically major parts. And they're going to be, obviously, the portrait, it's going to be an image of him batting and another image of him standing. That's how I usually piece together these elements. I work out the 3 sort of major, or 4 or 5 or however many. Usually I like to go with an odd number. I basically fill whatever layout I'm doing, whether it's portrait, landscape, whatever it is. It could be a circle design, whatever it is. I like to make sure I have an odd amount. Usually 3 is a good number. And that's how I basically start framing my my composition.
Yeah.
And so these 3 elements will become my framework, and then everything else in between is basically filling that space to make it look as chaotic as possible, with a sense of design to it as well. So I piece him like that. I can see there's a few little bits and pieces in here that it's traced as well. Okay, so I've got him there. For this one, I actually want him, everything is going to be contained when I finish it. Everything's going to be contained within this rectangular shape, but I want him sitting out on top, basically, just to, there we go. All right, so I've got him in place. I'll then go back to my elements one. I think this one here was the other one. So I've already done that image trace that I had done before. I'm going to copy him over. Now these are by these two elements that I've, these 2 images of Jackie here that I've copied over are by no means the finished artwork. I still have to draw them like I drew him. And then in there I might play around with the different, textures and effects like that. But for the time being, I think this will do. And then, so everything's on the angle. Piece in there. Again, once I start putting other bits and pieces in there, I might play around with size and things like that. I want him at the base. I want him at the back. And then from there, so one of the things I really wanted to show in this was the old stadium that they used to play in. which was called Ebbets Field in Brooklyn. Where's my sketches? So if I go to my sketches, and that's this here. So I basically took a photo of Ebbets Field online. I took it into Photoshop. I mucked around with the different threshold options, level options, and all that sort of thing to get this sort of retro thing. And then I basically redrew it with pen on paper. I printed it out and redrew it just to give me that feel.
Are you ever tempted to just live trace it?
I can, but I wanted it to have a particular look. Like I wanted this left side to have the dark shadows, and then the right side to have the light hitting it. A lot of the time when you live trace it, you're limited with what it can do. So I wanted to draw it in a way where it matched the same style as how I was drawing all these other faces, with the harsh shadow on one side and the light on the other. So it is a bit of a time-consuming it's a back and forth process, because I'll find the image, I will Photoshop the image, I'll print that image, I'll trace, draw that image, trace over it, whatever, add bits and pieces that I think work, and also in the style that I want it to look like. This obviously, because it's a sketch, is still not quite clean. Like you can see, I would obviously clean that up. I won't draw that one today just because that will take a long time.
A long time for the detail there, for sure.
Yeah, that took a long time just to sketch with a pen. So, you can only imagine in Illustrator. Sorry, where's my live file? I've got a lot of files here. Okay, so I'm going to bring that over. I've actually changed the reason it's coming, it's got that transparent look. If you go to and of course it's one of the windows I don't have open. If you go to your transparency window, you can actually play around with the different lighting effects here, which is great. So if you go to darken, basically all the white in that image becomes see-through. So it's a good way of being able to lay on top. When I'm piecing together all these compositions, I can see, okay, that works quite well there, or maybe it would look better up there, or whatever. But because this is a stadium and there's people on the floor, I want this element to be on the ground, on the base of this this thing here. And what I'm trying to do at the moment is I've got my 3 things. I want things going up on these angles, filling it in between. I don't want Jackie in the middle here to be completely isolated like that. I want things overlapping him. I want things sitting behind him. I want him to sort of be, submerged in everything else. So what I'll do, that was my sketch I brought over. Should have, if I go back to my other file, I've already got that one here. So this is the file I was working on before. I will bring it over. So what I've done here is I know the colors I want it to be in, and even if I don't, you can always muck around with that. Same sort of thing I did with the text before. So what I'll do, I'll just show you guys. I'll live. I will. Why is it not working? So I'll show you here. I'll get rid of this. So this basically here is the live trace version of this sketch over here. Let me just do it up on a bit of a blank screen. Let's go over here. Okay, so that's my sketch there. I've live traced it over here, and then all I want to do, rather than me draw around all these edges to fill the color, I basically just duplicate that layer, that image. So I copy and paste. I'll drop it to the back again. I'll go to the stroke color, and actually the fill color as well, and I'll change it to whatever color, and then I just play around with the key line to give it that nice outline.
Oh, that's cool.
I'll then outline that stroke, and then all these bits and pieces here, I'll draw a really, really rough line with that same beige color just to fill it in, and that's pretty much it. Obviously, come the final illustration, I'll do it a lot cleaner and a lot neater. Drop that to the back. So now you've got your thing, and then I'll group that together. I like using a lot of key lines for a lot of these elements, just so it sort of pops off whatever it's sitting on top of. So I want him basically. I think I'm going to have the stadium from here is how I like to reduce that space. I'm going to just now. These 3 elements are pretty much separate to each other. And when I want things overlapping each other, all I'm going to do is copy it. I'm going to select that image and I'm going to copy it on top of that. So now that image here is sitting on top. That's behind him. I think, as you can see in my sketch here, I've already laid out where I think I want things to sit. So I'm going to have some text sitting in here. And I'm actually going to use this old banner here that we were talking about before. I'm going to use that, I think. That's what I've sort of marked out in here, even with this sketch, I had no idea what I was going to put there, but I knew roughly I wanted some sort of old retro typography lock-up sort of thing, just to help balance. We've got a lot of actual imagery here, so I don't want the whole thing to be image. I want to balance a mix between typography, image, logo, all sorts of different textures, all that sort of stuff, just so it becomes a bit more interesting. And it helps actually give everything around it its own sort of uniform space as well. So even though everything's all chaotic, you can still work out what's what by looking at it. So obviously we've got a lot of beige in here. I want to add some more colors. So I think I'm going to go with, I want a really nice sort of color. So even just by changing it to navy, it creates a whole different look.
I like that look.
Yeah, and I'm just going to muck around with these sorts of colors in here, just double click my way through, go with a lighter color. I think white's probably going to be a bit too harsh on here, so I might use the magic wand tool and change all the white. Sometimes you have to go right in there though, that's all. Change the white to this sort of beigey color that I'm using throughout. And I think, actually no, I think this text I'll make the same color as the key line. Yeah, something like that, just to give it that sort of nice look. Again, what I like to do, I keep all these extra elements that I'm using separate. I'm going to copy and paste that again because I want to flip this on the angle. If for some reason I decide I want it, a different, straight on, it's good to have this original file there ready to go just in case, rather than trying to, rotate it back to its original place.
Yeah.
So I'm sort of just going to follow roughly those lines. And then I want it sort of sitting behind both of them like that. Oops, sorry, wrong layer. This is what happens when you're not used to working in multiple layers.
There was a question about your layers before, and we did address it really early on, but there's been a lot of people that have joined since the very beginning. Just around how your layers work, because you don't tend to use very many layers. Which maybe you could explain. You can explain. I use
absolutely. I basically, as you can see on the right here, I use layers. I use limited layers, if you like. So I've got a layer for my artwork background color, that sort of beige color, which is fine because that's the color I know it's going to sit within the background. I then have a layer for my sketch that I've created for the whole layout that I have sitting on top of that, which obviously you can see there. That's obviously what I'm using to piece together the composition. I then have a layer for all my sketches, which I would have a few more layers of these sketches in here usually, but because I'm not drawing these elements right now, I don't have that. So I would have and I would label these differently. So I'd have, sketch 1, sketch 2, or whatever, or portrait sketch, pose sketch, whatever it is. So I'd have a few layers for my sketches. And then basically for this artwork layer is pretty much the final artwork layer, if you like. So everything that's going to be in the final piece will be in that one layer. At the moment, the way I've drawn it, everything is individually grouped. So if I want to, rather than going through my layer palette here, which can, for me anyway, can get quite time consuming and quite complicated, I basically just have everything grouped here, and if I want to move something, I can. And even if I was to group everything together, all I need to do is just double click my way through to pick each individual element, and then I can move it around or whatever. So that's just the way I like to work. Especially when I'm working on these compositions, the idea, like this original sketch that I have here, it may not even work. I may need to move things around and things like that. So having it all in the one layer where I can just double click my way through and literally just move things, copy and paste things, put things on top of each other or sitting behind it. For me, it's just a much easier way of working with it. And then I guess because everything's individually grouped, if I really wanted to, I could move them all into separate layers eventually anyway. But for the ease of what I do, it's just much easier keeping it all in the one layer. So I do work with layers, but I guess a more simplified way of working with layers.
Yeah, cool.
So, and what I was thinking originally...
Thanks for showing us that.
No, that's fine.
Yeah, that's great.
No, that's fine. That's fine. So I've got this text in here. I love working with different text. Like I love sort of old newspaper articles and headlines and things like that. So I just want some text in here. And I actually came across... I love creating my own sort of vintage banners, if you like, or not necessarily just vintage, but I love playing with different typography and creating my own sort of things like that. So I went online. Here's Team Brooklyn Dodgers. They won the World Series, that they call it, back in 1955. So I wanted this whole section at their old field. This whole section here, I wanted to focus on that. So we've got the old pennant sitting there, but I wanted some text. My original idea was to create text that basically, like an old game day poster or headline in the newspaper, where a lot of it was just text-based, and it would tell you, the teams that are playing, the stadium, the time, all that sort of stuff. So I've actually got one that I've already created right here. So this is the eventual file, but I can actually show you guys, if anyone's interested, of how I actually put it all together.
Yeah, we're definitely interested. So it's like an old pennant. I'm not sure if you said that, but that might have been what you said. But
So basically I've just used, I'll copy it over, and I will just, for the purpose of this, I'll just rotate it. This isn't going to look in line now, just because I've had to move different things across to fit that space that I want it to fit in. So things are a bit more legible. But basically I just wanted to create almost like those old boxing style posters, for a big prize fight or something like that. Very simple fonts, a couple of different fonts in there. So I basically think to myself, okay, I wanted to, and everything is on a different type line, if you like. Every single thing on the line. That way I can just play around with, I'll type in Brooklyn originally, Dodgers I want to fit. I like everything to sort of fit to the same edge. Everything just has that balance, and, all the lines line up and things like that. So what I'll do, I'll just show you now. So that's the original one. And yeah, it was just a matter of, so if I try it over here, it's just a matter of playing around with different fonts that I think would work.
Do you ever get these printed? Like, if you ever printed a pennant, you got a lot of artwork behind you. You ever got a printed on material pennant? That'd be pretty cool.
No, I'd love to. There's actually a company that I follow on Instagram, and I have reached out to them before, over the years, just to see if there's anything we could do together. And they were interested. It's just finding the right thing to do. So these are all my fonts in my font library. I've got a lot of retro vintage sort of fonts, script, sans serif sort of things, all that sort of stuff. So for me, it's basically just finding what font I like the look of. And for the purpose of this, all I'm going to do is just eyedrop this font, and it'll show me. So this is a font I use a lot.
What's it called?
And then
sure,
it's Babus. Bebus New, or Babus. I'm not sure how you actually pronounce it, to be honest. Bebus. Let's go with Bebus. So yeah, obviously I want Brooklyn Dodgers to be the main feature of this. I can increase. Sometimes I just increase the size of the font, but sometimes you can just play around with the spacing of the letters to fill that space, which looks a bit better actually. Excuse me. Yeah, and then again, it's the same sort of process, or exact same process for this sort of thing. I don't want all the text to have the same font, because that can get a bit boring. It's nice to have a bit of break it up a little bit. So we'll have verses, and we'll have that quite small, I think, because they're obviously the opposition that I don't want to focus on them. So it's just little things like that.
It is interesting, isn't it? Then, like the little bit of typographic kind of thing, that they're not going to put the New York Yankees as big as the Brooklyn Dodgers when it's made by the Brooklyn Dodgers.
That's right.
And also the
exactly. Yeah, exactly. So yeah, it's funny. It's funny how, especially with typography, all little subtle things, how much it can tell you about what they're trying to say in a piece. Obviously they've made that. Well, I've made it much smaller, but I've obviously got this inspiration from other, posters, banners that I've seen from back in that time where they really do focus on one thing, or, it might be even a tennis player. It might be like the headline tennis guy against a lowly ranked guy. So they'll put his name really small and the bigger, it's like the main feature sort of thing. So that's basically what I do. A lot of the stuff, but then use stars to indicate that it was a big event, showcase sort of event. So I've just tried to make it look as retro as I can. It still is very clean, like there's no texture or anything through it, but I think for the purpose of this, it's fine. And then same as all my illustrations, I basically hover over. Everything's grouped together as one element. I haven't outlined any of these strokes yet because when I put it into the composition, I may need to update the fonts just to feel it a bit better, but I think this one will look, and then I flip it on the angle. I don't really have this uniform angle for everything. It's sort of whatever just looks okay to the eye. And then
you just eyeball that as well. You're not like, it needs to be exactly 35 degrees or anything. You just
exactly. Just eyeball it. I mean, there's times where I might angle it, and okay, obviously that doesn't look right. So I just eyeball it. I'm going to copy it into my file here on the artwork layer, and I'm going to take that to the back. Let me just hide the sketch for a second. So obviously there's a lot of this beige color. I want this text to really stand out. So all I'm going to do, I'll get my sketch layer back. All I'm going to do is get the square tool. I'm going to create a shape and fill it with color. And I think I'll go with the dark color. And same sort of thing, really basic way. I'm just going to put that there. All the way there. I'm going to send that to the back, and that becomes my base color. And this text is a bit big, so I want more. I want more of the text, and I like cropping text, and that's something I really like playing with my work. Is I don't want things to be too literal sometimes. So obviously now you can sort of make out different words, and it's amazing how your brain how it reacts to something like, obviously Dodgers is cut off completely. I love the Brooklyn Dodgers. If you know your sport, if you know your sport, you go, oh, hang on, that looks like Dodgers. Obviously, World Series, all that type of stuff. So little things like that. I like playing with stuff like that.
And I guess in this sense as well, that's not the only place that says Brooklyn, and it's not the only thing that says Brooklyn. You've got the logo on the hats. Right. You've got Dodgers over to the left on his shirt. You've got Dodgers above as well. So you don't have to make it. Yeah. Not all the information is just in there because you have that collage kind of style.
And then that's right. Otherwise, it gets a bit too repetitive. Like it's the same thing over and over again. So it's nice, even using the same elements but modifying them a bit. It's amazing the effect that it can actually have. And then it does work back. Obviously, we've got a very specific theme with this piece. So obviously, everything's going to be related back to him and the team and the era at the time and the place they were in. So so it's things like that. And then what I do now, obviously, I'm focused on this section. I still think it's missing something. Like it still looks like, piece there, piece there, piece there. I like bringing these things together. And I personally love just things sitting on top of things, So it's like, one thing after another. So there's actually a great image that I've already sketched up actually of him swinging the bat with the, have I got it in this file? No, I don't think I brought it over in this file. I think it's back in here in my working file. So this is basically my usual working file, but for the sake of today, I've there it is. So I'm gonna this guy here, copy him over. So I've got him now in. This is a great sort of action shot. This is going to be a lot more simplified. This one, so obviously everything's same sort of style with the harsh shadow. It is a simplified, style of drawing anyway, but this one I'm going to keep really, really simple. I'm not going to bother about zooming in like I did with his eye and everything before.
That looks great with this effect, with the shadow. It kind of looks like they're playing at sundown or something.
Exactly.
And,
and that's
it has
all
so much drama.
Yeah, and that's all you need. It's just suggestive. That's all it is. And I basically, the way I envision it is sort of sitting in here, which you guys probably would have seen in that file before anyway. I sort of gave it away, but I want something just sitting here. I still want this text visible, and it's nice to have big areas to fill the space as well, so it doesn't get too chaotic, if you like. And so it's just a layer on top of a layer. And I love, like, obviously you've got what I like playing with is you've got the shadow of these guys here. It just sits on top. It doesn't actually, it's just floating there. It doesn't have to be, doesn't have to have a finished edge or things like that. So that's what I like playing with. And then I still think the stadium's a bit too big. So I want that just to be a bit smaller.
There was a couple of questions just about your fonts before, so I just thought I'd mention it now. Just where you get your fonts. Do you just use the like stock standard? There's a lot of Adobe fonts now, or have you downloaded a lot of fonts over the years, or what's your approach?
Yeah, a bit of both. I've got a lot of fonts that I've purchased. I've got a lot of fonts that I've downloaded from the free sites. Some of them you still need to purchase, or you need to credit the creator of the fonts and things like that. And then a lot I actually get from the Adobe library now, which is great. There's so many on there.
So many,
yeah, which is cool. So a bit of both, to be honest. I've now got a whole library of different fonts that I use, and a lot of my work I actually refer back to the same fonts over and over again. So I might have 300 fonts on here, but I use maybe 10. So it's unless I'm creating something with a really specific look. So it's just a matter of finding the right font. I have used fonts in the past, and I like to credit the different creators of those fonts, because it's another art form. Creating all this typography and fonts, it's a whole other art form. And we're lucky that we have a database now where we can just access all this stuff really, really quickly and very efficiently. So
absolutely,
even looking at this now, I've got like I was saying before, I've got a lot of figurative looking things mixed in with some type. I want this section here is sort of standing out to me before anything else. Like I want, like, obviously the way I've sketched this stadium, it just sort of ends. There's nothing to it. So and because it's in the middle of the canvas, if you like, rather than to the edge, I want something there to sort of fill that space. So in my mind, I had similar, like another pennant looking thing, or the flag thing, which is back in this is the one here that I drew up, this Brooklyn flag.
Yeah, it's my favorite.
I drew up. And so I think, obviously, a nice long piece like this, working on the angle, could work really well. It may not work, but I have tried it before, and to me, I think it has worked. So, but a lot of the time, it's just experimenting. Make sure, all the lines and everything are outlined, so I can shrink this with ease without it distorting anything. And what I'm going to do, I want it basically sitting here, so it really helps accentuate these sorts of diagonal lines that we're working with. Like these three images do that thing. Now that we've got some more sort of symmetrical elements we're working with here, I want it to go back to that really overstated angle sort of feel. So I'm just going to grab it, I'm going to rotate it with the rotate tool. Again, just eyeball the angle. And basically I want it just to sit in here. Now I've got an idea in mind where I want, and obviously I want to piece it in a way that, before, if I had it like that, you've got these little parts sticking through, which to me look a bit messy. So I like piecing it together so everything's sort of clean, like it covers that. We've got a little section down here now that needs to be filled. So all I'm going to do is, with the rectangle tool, I'm going to do a black square, and I'm going to copy it into this stadium picture, and that now becomes, so that fills that area.
Yeah.
Once I obviously crop all this,
just because it can be hard to keep track of it, but we've only got about 4.5 minutes left, believe it or not.
Are you kidding me? Wow. Here I am chatting away.
No, it's perfect. It's just the time she
really
flies.
Quick.
Pretty fast, huh?
Yeah, wow. Wow. That's crazy. If only all days felt like this. Some days just drag on and on. Wow. And so I want to go back to, again, I guess one of the things I should say as well is that obviously image and text and everything balancing each other out is great, but also I want the colors to balance out as well. So I don't want things that are too grey on one side or too navy on the other. So I like having a mix of different things. So what I might do is I'll quickly, the effect I wanted to do for this particular image, you can see I've got on my sketch layer, I've got two outlines basically. I want this beige to basically sit inside, and I'm just going to eyeball it for now. Actually, no, instead of that, I'm going to enlarge the sketch to the size of the canvas because it should be the same size. Sorry, not the sketch, the background. I'm going to, it's roughly out. Okay, actually, I'll do the same with the sketch as well. So what I want to do, I'm just going to copy that out of the way for the moment. I think the easiest thing to do is for me to re-edit my artboard just to fit what I'm trying to do. I would usually have this all sized, but I think we've only got a few minutes left, so I just do it this way. Nice and quick.
Cool.
This is a very, very messy way of working, but sometimes that can be the most efficient. So, all right, so that's my sketch like that. Now, what I want to do back on my background layer is just copy that beige color again. Now, the way I had envisioned this is that I want the beige, it's almost like it's going to have a white mountain board, if you like. So I'm going to put that layer on top. So, and I want some things contained in this beige section and some things sitting on top. Now, it's not quite, all right, that'll do. Now I'm going to get rid of there. So basically that's it. So I've got my artwork. Now what I do is I'm just going to do it like this. I'll come in a bit more actually. A lot more. Well, that's way out. There we go. So I'm going to, that's basically my cropped area. I'm going to duplicate that layer and I'm going to put it onto the artwork. I'm going to copy and paste it onto the artwork layer. And then I'm just going to convert to an outline, make sure it's all sitting on top. And all I'm going to do is basically create a clipping mask. I'm going to turn that off. I'm just going to drag the whole thing, and the shortcut I'm using an iMac is Command 7 or Apple 7, whatever you want to call it. And so that's basically clipped everything into that beige area. Yeah. Now, what I was saying before, I want a couple of these elements to sort of sit on top. So I'm going to basically just copy and paste them, and they will basically just sit on top of the artwork. I might even make him a little bit bigger just to add. It's just, you don't have to do that, but it's just
no, I think it's a really cool effect, and I did notice it in your work, in some of the digital work that we were looking at. That I really like the how they pop out of the frame. I think it's a really cool thing to do.
Just adds, and I guess another layer of depth, if you like. So something a bit different. So obviously we don't have much time or any time left. So I'll actually go over to the final file.
Yeah, no time left. The final file. That is us.
So this isn't quite finished. I still, I'm still playing around with, I think what I've done in the other file I prefer with his face. These are still sort of sketches that I've got in place. All this other stuff is pretty much final. They're all sort of vector images anyway. And I wanted it sitting basically on top. The other thing I was talking about before is layout. Like there's other layouts that I've played around with. So originally I started with like that. And then another one was this one.
Unfortunately, Alex, we're going to get hard cut off, and I don't want to get cut off without thanking you for your time. It's been amazing. I've absolutely really loved speaking with you and hanging out with you and watching your process. We definitely need to get you back on and spend some more time together on Adobe Live. It would be great.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me. I've really appreciate it. It was a lot of fun. So thank you. And thanks to everyone for tuning in.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you everybody for tuning in, especially if you caught both streams. It's been fantastic. Had a great time today. And we'll share some links of where you can follow Alex as well and see his amazing work. And we'll see you next time on Adobe Live.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.